I like the brackets. I think they are good. Well, for the most part. Conceptually, I actually think they are great. Much better than the previous system of 4 different bandits. This is much more accessible and focuses on the real issue, being communicating intent. Intent is the most important aspect of a pre-game discussion, and up to this point we've been sorely lacking in tools to ease that communication. And to be clear, I'm not talking about possibly deceitful intent. Bad actors will always do whatever they want. Instead, I mean the intent players have while building their deck. What kind of matches are their desired outcome? So far, most of this kind of discussion has been centered around power levels. But power levels are incredibly difficult to quantify, not just because of the incomprehensible quantity of cards and their possible combinations, but also because of differences in player skill. Players perceive power levels different from each other, so it's not a useful metric. But if we communicate what kind of experience is desired, then everybody can work towards that goal in their own way. Power level discussions can't succeed because Commander's Rule Zero problem isn't a power level problem, but a communication problem. That's not to say that power level isn't part of the question, but because of those mismatched understandings, information about power levels needs to be communicated very precisely. And that brings us to game changers. The new bracket system, which is notably not called power brackets anymore, introduces the concept of game changers, a list of exceedingly powerful cards that shape a Commander game when they are played. Cards like Smothering Tithe, Rhystic Study, and Demonic Tutor, the usual suspects. The Game Changer list is then used to help define the brackets, and we'll get to that in a moment. But first, I want to say that I really like the Game Changer list. This is the kind of communication tool we have needed for a long time. This gives us a list of cards and a definition. If I want to play without the strongest cards in the format, I can just say I want to play a match without game changers, and then either everybody already knows what I'm talking about, or I can easily provide them with that information. So I'm very glad that game changers now exist. But I don't think the current list is perfect. Personally, I find it a bit odd to see Mana Drain missing from it, but to be honest, I'm not particularly interested in discussing which cards should and shouldn't be on there. In my opinion, it's broadly correct and can be narrowed down over time. I assume that it will eventually get there and be accurate enough. The more important matter to me are the principles behind the choices and if those feel like they make sense. And I have to say, yeah, they do to me. All the cards on this list are overwhelmingly powerful, and the individual justifications given for each of them are reasonable. With one exception. Sol Ring should be on the Game Changer list. It's the strongest card in the format and it drastically shapes games around itself when it's played. Despite that, it's in every deck, and I think that's an overall negative. I wouldn't be happy if every single deck played a Rhystic Study or a One Ring either. These cards are so powerful that they can define entire games and turn them into non-interactive experiences, even at the highest power levels. And for that reason, I have long removed Sol Ring from all of my decks. Now here's the interesting thing though. Wizards acknowledges as much. They themselves say that Sol Ring is powerful enough to be considered a game changer. But then they make an emotional call on tradition to justify its exclusion from the list. And while doing so, they immediately downplay Sol Ring's power level by saying that every deck gets exactly one Sol Ring to let it power up and accelerate a bit extra on occasion. A bit extra is an unbelievable understatement that makes the sentence disingenuous at best and an outright lie at worst. On top of that, at no point do they say or even imply that Commander is a more enjoyable experience because of Sol Ring. They don't say that Sol Ring should be given special treatment because it's good for the game, but instead because it's entrenched into the game. And I disagree with this. Sol Ring should be a game changer. A counterpoint that will often be brought up is that Sol Ring is in all of the precons, so it can't be messed with. But I think that's just not true. Sol Ring is incredibly easy to replace. Just put in a basic land. Trouble in Pairs and Jeskkar's Will are also on the Game Changer list, and both of them have appeared in precons and are more difficult to find replacements for. I simply don't believe that this would be a big problem, since even if a player is playing with an unmodified old precon that has a Soul Ring in it, then I think the other players could, without much trouble, just explain that in 2025 Wizards changed how Soul Ring is treated in the format and that they should replace it with a basic land. I don't see people getting mad over that. And I'm not even arguing Soul Rings should be banned. You can keep your collection of shiny toys. They should just be properly classified as what they are, a game changer. But I have no delusions about my opinion here changing anything, because I can only argue with logic, and I'm going up against an emotional argument, making it frustrating and ultimately pointless. So let's move on to the brackets themselves. Bracket 1, Exhibition, is essentially about joke decks. Decks that have chosen a theme that's actively detrimental to them winning and then fully embrace that theme. The hard rules here are no game changers, 2-card combos, mass land denial or extra turns, and tutors should be sparse. I don't have much to say about this bracket. I think it's cute that it exists, but ultimately I feel like only a very small portion of the player base are engaging with decks on this level. Bracket 2, Core, then is supposed to be the average power level of a modern day precon, with mostly the same restrictions as Bracket 1. As the name implies, this is meant to be the actual baseline for power level in regular play, which makes sense since you can't just go and buy a precon and then you're playing at a precon power level. Well, kind of. There are actually pretty drastic differences in power level even among modern precons. The Duskmourn Jumpscare precon, for example, is a huge outlier in how powerful it is, and in his own video, Gavin also acknowledges that the Modern Horizon 3 precons were more powerful than a regular precon. There's an argument to be made that this power level isn't quite as clear as Wizards wants it to be, as they sometimes fail in their own assessment of deck strength. But I'm okay with letting that slide. Ultimately, I think people understand the general vibe of precons and can work with a vague description like this. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm fine with Bracket 2 as is. We're about to get into the meat of everything, and I don't want to interrupt that, so if you've enjoyed the video so far, please give it a thumbs up. Bracket 3 is upgraded. In Bracket 3, decks are stronger than precons, but not fully optimized. They may also include up to 3 game changers and 2-card combos so long as they can't come down early. When I first read Bracket 3, I felt like I missed something. We went from precons straight to no more mentions of themes and the inclusion of game changers and 2-card combos. I understand that it's being presented as just a bit of each, but 3 game changers is actually quite a lot. I'm also not a big fan of 2-card combos in casual, mostly because they create awkward incentives of needing to target down the combo players, and if I successfully do so, then they have to sit there until the next game starts, and that kind of sucks for everybody, but this is a topic for another day. For now, I want to focus on the game changers. Joey from EDHREC made a video where he talks about the exact statistics of this, but in short, there aren't that many decks that even run more than 3, unless they are in CEDH, and the vast majority of decks play between 0 and 1. Game changers are cards that players have been willingly and knowingly opting out of. This lines up with my personal experience and applies to me. Literally none of my decks apart from my CEDH deck play any game changers, and I didn't modify them after the list came out. Now, here's an interesting phenomena. When you tell people that they can only do something 3 times, then even if they weren't doing it before, they will now do it 3 times, right? If I tell you to do whatever you want, you will do whatever you want. But if I tell you that you can only do this 3 times, you will think of it as a budget and plan how to best use those 3 opportunities. I think I understand what they're trying to communicate by allowing 3 game changers. They're trying to say that Bracket 3 is where you put some spice into your deck. And I agree with that. But the spice shouldn't be, here's a broken card. Instead, what I think it should be, and what it often is here's a really cool synergy and effective engine that works well within and because of my deck's theme, idea, or commander. I like Commander the best when players get to showcase their creativity by reaching deep into the vast card pool and pulling out the weirdest but somehow effective strategies. That's how I build my own decks. And within this framework, I can build really powerful lists, and I've seen lots and lots of other people build very strong decks. If I play my decks against precons, they will stomp them. Because frankly speaking, precons are just not that powerful, with again a few notable exceptions. I don't like game changers, and it's not just because they are overpowered, although that's part of it, but mostly because they become such major parts of matches while being boring and uninteresting. To sum it up, to me the best Commander experience excludes game changers, but takes place at a distinctly higher power level than precons. This is just my personal opinion and how I enjoy Commander, but I intentionally waited with making this video so I could have some in-person conversations and observe the general feedback, and I think a lot of people agree with me. I'm delighted that we now have an easy way of defining these cards, so I can tell people that, hey, I am not playing with game changers, but my deck is competent and well above a precon level. Unfortunately though, the bracket system doesn't account for me right now. I really shouldn't play against precons, but I also don't really want to play against free game changers in every deck. A lot of this seems to assume that precons are a core part of my play experience, and that is likely true for a lot of players, but it doesn't describe me. I understand that it could well be that I am just a minority here that's not worth making a whole bracket for, but that wouldn't align with my experience playing the game. I know a lot of people that think the same way that I do. This is where I'm really interested in learning how you guys feel. I might just be projecting my personal preference and experience onto a larger group than there really exists. I'm open to the possibility that people just really love their game changers, I guess? I also wonder if part of this is regional. From my experience, there's actually a significant difference between the larger German meta game and the US one, with the US meta placing much higher emphasis on game changer style cards. I would also like to briefly complain about Wizards saying that decks are not fully optimized. Decks in this category will often be optimized. They're just not optimized for power, instead they're optimized for power within a theme, and that is something that shouldn't be so easily dismissed. Either way, let's move on for now. Bracket 4 is optimized, and there's that word again, optimized. Optimized for power, I assume. I really don't like the way they use this word here. Either way. High-powered decks with no restriction other than the ban list. Winning becomes more of a focus as a result. I don't have much to say about this. Seems great for the people that enjoy it. I know a bunch of people that like to play in this kind of environment, but it's just not for me. Finally then, bracket 5 is CEDH, with the same lack of restrictions as bracket 4. I've seen this cause some confusion, as it's not super clear what even is the difference between brackets 4 and 5. Here's how I understand it, maybe I can help clarify a bit. In bracket 4, your deck still has a theme. It's just pushed as far as it can possibly go with the strongest cards available. So for example, you might play a Yuriko deck with all of the best ninjas, some high-cost cards to blast damage and extra turns. It's still thematically a ninja deck, just with the best options available. But in bracket 5, winning is the theme. The Yuriko deck plays Oracle Consultation. In bracket 5, the only criteria for inclusion is if it increases your chance of winning, while in bracket 4, there's still some space for other considerations. Or the way a lot of people have been putting it, if you have to ask, then it's not CEDH. I think this could have been communicated more clearly, assuming my interpretation is correct. But given that, I think bracket 4 and 5 are totally fine. The biggest issue I see at the moment is that I feel like there's not enough difference between bracket 3 and 4, and too much emphasis on bracket 2. Now, I see two ways this could be solved. First would be to add another bracket, let's call it 2.5. 2.5 would be what I described, stronger than precons but no game changes. However, if we were to do that, then I feel like 3 and 4 just kind of become the same bracket. As Joey demonstrated, even a lot of high-power decks don't play more than 3 game changers anyways. And if you're playing 3, what's really the difference between 3 and 4? But maybe there is a point. We could have Exhibition as the lowest power bracket, then precons, then strong decks but without broken cards, and all of these are the socially focused branch of Commander. Then, in the competitively focused branch, we start with a few overpowered cards for the people that enjoy that. Could even increase it to, let's say, 5 and expand the list so that there are more options to consider. And afterwards, we go into high power and then CEDH. But I feel like this is making things too complicated. We ideally want as few brackets as possible. So the better solution, I think, is to just ban game changers from bracket 3. This would create a clearer divide between brackets 3 and 4 and ease the understanding of brackets as intention as opposed to just being a way to define power levels. This is another issue with bracket 3 at the moment. Brackets 1 and 2 make sense from an intent point of view, so do brackets 4 and 5, although that could use some clarification. But bracket 3 feels like it's trying to capture a vibe as opposed to being a proper guideline. We want you to be a bit broken, but not really. The rules of this section, at the moment, feel like the creators mean to say, you can do a bit of this, but with this kind of energy. And then they try to define what that vibe means, and it's just not really coming across in my opinion. However, I think all of this is fixable. This system at its core is solid. It's just the nuances that need work. At the very least, it's given me a way to communicate how I like to play Commander. Socially focused decks that are more powerful than precons but don't play any game changers. How fantastic is that? Now we have a really great starting point for figuring out how to play with each other. I am optimistic that all of this can be figured out. This then brings us to the digital adaptation of these systems. Scryfall and, as a result, deck builders have already started listing game changers as game changers, which I think is great. Less great though is that the deck builders are trying to automatically categorize decks for players. This is missing the point of the system so hard that if it fails, then I know who to blame. Brackets are often misunderstood to be a communication tool about power. Them being called power brackets before certainly doesn't help. But that's wrong. Instead, they are a communication tool about intent. This means that having tools like Moxfield automatically detect the brackets is complete nonsense. The machine doesn't know my intent. It can't know my intent. If they want automatic integration, they should make it a field that's constantly in your face, asking what your intent is until you fill it in. That way, players are forced to engage with the language of the system and have to make a conscious choice. But just slapping a default label on every deck is not only completely missing the point, but also making it so that players are only engaging with the system on a surface level, which makes it all feel wrong and poorly considered, even though it isn't. Literally all of my decks were automatically labeled as a 2, which is incorrect. They were not built with the intent of being played against precons. But of course the machine can't know that. It can only check how many game changers are in them. This is purely misinformation spread by a system that's already widely used and will now spread this information to everybody that's using it. I understand that they just want to smooth players' transition into the system, but I think they found the worst possible implementation and accomplished the exact opposite. On Moxfield on day 1, you couldn't even change your deck's bracket, which is insane that that was ever approved. It's the most programmer-pilled understanding of this kind of stuff I could ever imagine. At least they fixed that. And I hope more improvements are to come, because the way it's currently now is damaging. It is horrible. In conclusion, I like this new system. I think it's much better than it was when they first previewed it. However, I currently don't feel represented, and I guess I will stick to my bracket 2.5, being decks stronger than precons but without game changers. I hope I don't have to do that permanently and that they can find a way to incorporate players like me within the system. Either way, overall, I'm pretty happy. I think the system is good. It needs work. It needs quite a bit of work. But the important thing is, I look at it and I see where the work can be done, right? Sometimes you look at a system and you think to yourself, I don't even know how to fix this. But this is fixable. Yes, it is a beta. And they said it's a beta. And it is bad like a beta. But it has all the potential that it needs to be good. So I'm optimistic. I'm looking forward to the future. And that's the video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys soon. Hi, sorry, Rachel Weeks just released an updated infographic and I think it's worth briefly tackling. What I find interesting about this infographic is that it pretty much confirms what I talked about in the video. I am not represented on this. So let's have a quick look at brackets 2 and 3. Bracket 2 says, I want a relaxed game with a satisfying ending. Decks are focused and functional but contain suboptimal cards and strategies. So far, I agree. I think suboptimal is a bit difficult to define. Like, for example, is a thematic inclusion suboptimal? It fits really nicely into my theme, but of course it's not the One Ring, although, you know, that's a game changer, but you get what I'm trying to say, right? But then it continues, comparable to an average modern precon. Wins are often telegraphed or incremental, and this is the part where you lose me. So then we go to upgraded. I like strong cards and I'm ready for battle. Decks are thoughtfully designed, powered up by synergy and additional card quality. I like this. This is cool. I want to play here. But then, again it continues, players may expect the game to end out of nowhere with powerful spells and some combos. And that's where you lose me again. I really feel like there's a bracket missing between these two. No, I don't really want it to end the game completely out of nowhere with powerful spells and some combos. But I also don't want to play a precon. Like, where do I go? So, you know, this is really my biggest criticism. Anyways, I just thought it would be worth to bring this up really quick. Sorry, I didn't even write a script for this. Just poor Tusky needs to cut it together. Anyways, goodbye.